Right. We don't know who the next Prime Minister is going to be, but I certainly know the problems he's going to face. And they're not just political problems. Even though the UK politics is in a mess and the MPs need sorting out badly. Because Brexit has shown our MPs to be arrogant, undemocratic idiots who go as far as to blatantly go against the wishes of their own constituents. And in recent times, scandals such as the cash for questions and the expenses scandal show them to be selfish, self-serving individuals. And when there's an expenses review in the House of Commons, the buildings fill to the rafters. But when there's important debates, such as debates about old age pensioners' pensions or mental health issues with young people, barely a handful of MPs bother their asses to turn up for them debates. It's disgraceful. But the next Prime Minister will have been an MP, so they'll be well aware of these issues. Let's hope they're solved. So, when the next person becomes Prime Minister, they will have two choices. They can follow the status quo and follow the path of the predecessors, which have all ended in failure, from May through Cameron to Brown and Blair. Or they can strive to write their names into the history books as a successful Prime Minister, even a great one. But in order to do so, they need to sort out the UK. They need to sort out UK politics and the MPs. They need to get Brexit through. They need to honour the 2016 referendum, and they need to fulfil the wishes of 17.4 million Britons. Once they've achieved this, they then need to turn their attention to the real problems of the UK. What they need to do is they need to ignore their esteemed colleagues, ignore the elite, ignore the rich, because these people will only paint a rosy picture of the UK today. What the new Prime Minister needs to do is they don't need to view the UK from their lofty perch atop the elitist tree. They need to come down into the garden where us little people live, a garden that has been ravaged by weeds that need to be ripped out urgently. So let me tell the new Prime Minister the kind of UK they're going to be presiding over. Well, it's a UK where the police have no compunction in chaperoning Muslim thugs to a peaceful political rally and standing by idly while the same thugs launch missiles, bricks, bottles, scissors towards the gathering, which includes families and women and children. The police will gladly stand by and allow this to happen and not even make one arrest, which is what happened in Oldham, Greater Manchester last week. In this country, if a white protester pours a milkshake over an MP or politician they disagree with, they're arrested. If a Muslim throws a milkshake over an MEP candidate he disagrees with, he gets put into a taxi by the police and sent merrily on his way home. The new Prime Minister will be taking over a country which, over the past 14, 15 years, has allowed grooming gangs to sprout up in towns all around the country. Grooming gangs that have been facilitated by the inaction of local police, local councils, and government. It's an absolute disgrace that young English girls have been allowed in their hundreds to be raped, to be groomed, to be passed around by Muslim men, by an establishment that is so afraid to upset Muslims, it would rather see its own young English girls raped. It's the biggest scandal in this country for the last 100 years. It's an absolute disgrace, and it still happens now, and the mainstream media and the government still collude to try to hush and limit the damage caused by this absolute fucking atrocity. The new Prime Minister will be taking over a country where, in the not too distant past, successive new Labour governments have flooded the country with immigrants in the hope of garnering the majority of their votes to help them stay in power. And it's a country where the police are afraid of Muslims. The police are instructed not to antagonize, not to upset Muslims for fear of Muslim riots in the street, like the government have obviously seen happen on the streets of Paris, but not via the mainstream media. He'll be taking over a country where mosques have now become a protected building. After the Christchurch attacks where 50 Muslims were shot by a lunatic, the Mayor of London promised the mosques of the UK extra police protection. A couple of weeks after that attack, when 300 Christians were slaughtered by a bunch of Muslim suicide bombers in churches in Sri Lanka, there was no such promise made to the churches of England. In this country, when a mosque is vandalised, it's classed as a terrorism act. It's investigated, as a few weeks ago when some windows got smashed in a mosque in Birmingham. It was investigated by the anti-terror police. When a church is attacked, it's just vandalism. Speaking of terrorism, the Prime Minister will be taking over a country where terrorists from the 1970s are given amnesties, and at the same time, British soldiers who fought for their country against these terrorists are being arrested and tried as criminals. It's shocking. This is a country, the UK, where recently a doctor with 23 years service was threatened with the sack for the horrendous crime of asking a Muslim woman who he was struggling to understand to take her face veil off so he could understand what she was saying regarding the illness of her young child. The man was threatened with the sack. And the saddest part of that episode is this. Some Muslim who belongs to some Muslim British group or Muslim council group or whatever, no doubt at taxpayers' expense, suggested that this doctor of 23 years be sent on a course to learn about diversity. Surely he would be better served suggesting that all Muslim men in Britain are sent on a course as to how to treat white English women. This is a country the new Prime Minister will be taking over, where mosques are blatantly allowing hate speakers amongst them, where mosques are facilitating the radicalisation of young Muslims, and it's all, again, being hush-hushed by the mainstream media. And anybody who highlights it is being slapped down and labelled. This is a country where Sharia law is creeping in, where honour killings between Muslims is taking place. Again, hush-hushed. It's a country where UK Muslims are leaving to go to Syria to fight for or support ISIS. And then when they wish to return to the UK, there is a clamour, would you believe it? There's a clamour in this country to allow them to return unhindered. You couldn't make this shit up, new Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's taking control of a country where the claim is that 4.8% of the country is Muslim. That's 1 in 20 people, which begs the question, why is such a small minority receiving such blatant, obvious, preferential treatment, special treatment? Is it because the establishment know fine well the figure is far in excess of 4.8%? It's so far in excess of 4.8% that it's at such a figure now that it would be impossible for the establishment to actually let the indigenous population of Britain really know the truthful figure as to how many Muslims are living in Britain today among them. This is a country where the police are more concerned with monitoring what's going on in social media than they are in solving actual crimes. I could take you, new Prime Minister, to any city or town in this country and I could point out 5, 6 times more traffic wardens patrolling the streets than there are police. It's a country where word crime, hate crime now supersedes any actual crime, and where crimes such as burglary are no longer even being investigated. It's a country where a man can receive a custodial sentence for leaving a bacon sandwich outside a mosque, but another man can beat up an old age pensioner and not receive jail time. It's a country where a protester can be arrested and jailed for a month for shouting Nazi at a lying, scheming, divisive MP such as Anna Soubry. Yet gangs and gangs of leftist protesters can scream Nazi at anybody who opposes their opinions, and there's no sanctions, there's no arrests, there's no police involvement. It's a country where the supposed far right are vilified and slandered at every turn, but leftist organisations, violent leftist organisations such as Antifa and Hope Not Hate and the Muslim Defence League are left unattended and tolerated. It's a country, the UK, where in the past half a century there's been a major push to find women a place in the workforce. Now, they couldn't be put in the fields or put in the mines, so they've been ushered into positions in education, in law enforcement and in law and order. And as a direct result of this, discipline in schools, discipline at home, discipline in society has all eroded because of this. And another follow-on from that is the knife crime that is rife that we see today. A knife crime, a crime that the police are either unwilling to or unable to put an end to. Partially because nobody in the establishment will accept the reasons. Nobody will stand up and admit that these crimes are predominantly being carried out by one specific type of individual against another specific type of individual, and that the perpetrators and the victims are practically of the same persuasion. And also, a few years ago, there was a big hoo-ha over stop and search, which would be an effective tool, but it was stopped because simply the police were afraid of being called racist. In this country, the lack of discipline has led to softer prison conditions. It's led to softer sentences, scandalous sentences that can see a murderer in the UK now walk in the streets before 10 years of his sentence is up. And the influence of women, this push to get women into employment, shines through in education, to the extent that nowadays in the UK, over 85% of primary school teachers are women. These are the women that are indoctrinating our young children. They're even trying now to push for 5 and 6-year-old children to be educated about the LGBTQ society. It's just ridiculous. It's just nonsense. The Prime Minister will be taking over a country where companies are being pressurised into prioritising the perception of diversity over the need to employ the right person for the job. This is leading to white men being discriminated against when applying for jobs that have been set aside for women and for ethnics only. If it was the other way around, the uproar would be massive. Look, we're living in a UK which has been flooded over the past 30 years by immigrants. This has caused an overpopulation of the UK that nobody will admit to. The official figures given for the population of this country are lies, And the reason they're lies is because there's an additional 10, 12, 14 million, how many ever it is, that either the government don't want to own up to, or the government simply don't know what they consist of. Either way, this additional population is causing a massive strain on the resources of the UK. It's causing a strain on hospitals, police, schools, transport. Okay? But it's leading to poverty in the UK. It's leading to normal hard-working couples struggling, sometimes having to work 10, 11 hours a day each, sometimes having 2 jobs just to make ends meet. It's also led to the increase in the pension age from 65 to 67. God knows what it'll be in 19 years' time when I reach 67, probably 75. It's also leading to thousands and thousands of homeless people on the streets. And this stretch on resources aligns to the decaying of Christian values in the UK. The intentional decaying of Christian values is leading to more and more single parents, which again is leading to more struggles. Now, as a counteract to all this, the mainstream media believes it's a good idea to create a distraction, and they've been doing so for the past decade with the creation of non-entities and making them into celebrities to feed the celebrity obsession in the UK. A celebrity obsession which is designed by the mainstream media and the ragtag red top newspapers to distract the people of the UK from real news, to the extent where people with the wherewithal to realise this is happening are actually going to foreign news outlets to find out what exactly is happening in our own country. Now, speaking of celebrities, the Prime Minister will be taking over a country where men are paid up to £250,000 a week to run around a field after a football. In fact, in one instance, one guy is paid £500,000 a week and he doesn't even run after the football. And all this in a country where food banks for thousands and thousands of people have become a necessity. It's an absolute shambles, the divide in this country between the haves and the have-nots. So, another thing the new Prime Minister, if he's still interested in the job, will have to deal with is a very, very dangerous political party in opposition. A party led by an absolute anti-Semitic, a terrorist sympathiser who's followed about by a bunch of useless sycophants, a party which can never be allowed in its current state to achieve power in the UK. Because this party, this leftist party, is one of the major causes of all our societal ills. Okay? And successive New Labour governments are the ones that have allowed the country to be overrun and to end up in the situation it's in now. But Jeremy Corbyn and the left and the Labour are continuing the push, continuing the same agenda, okay? Pushing the feminist movement, pushing the LGBT movement, pushing the Islamic movement, all in the UK. Yeah? And if this agenda is left uncontested, it will destroy the UK. It will destroy British values. It will destroy British heritage and British culture. At the moment, it's already eroding them. And all this agenda being facilitated by a biased mainstream media, yeah, by a shocking BBC, a BBC that taxpayers pay a licence fee to run, a BBC that goes against the remit to provide unbiased coverage to the British people. It's been facilitated, this agenda, by the police. and it's been facilitated and driven by the leftist parties. So all this is resulting in the UK being paralysed by a fear for upsetting the above, for upsetting women, upsetting Muslims, upsetting homosexuals. And anybody who does upset any of the above is being labelled, and is being sanctioned all over the country for doing so. And moreover, more than ever, we need a strong leader. We need a strong Prime Minister. We need a strong Tory leader. Because despite their failings, the Tory party is the only party who can prevent the UK descending into this madness. So the new Prime Minister, you've got your remit. You need to get the UK out of Europe. We need to end this political correctness madness. We need to end this ridiculous paralysis and fear of upsetting anybody. And we need to stop, you need to help stop this kowtowing down to the leftist fools with their foolish, ruinous ideologies. So whoever you're going to be, get into power. Do it now. Get it done before it's too late. Get it done before it's too late and the UK is ruined and the UK is rendered unrecognisable from the Great Britain of the 20th century. So it's time, new Prime Minister, to step forward. Write your name into history. Till next time, take care.